The Valkyrie Dominion had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their empire stretched across 900 worlds, and every species in the Orion Spur knew their name. Some spoke it with respect, most spoke it with fear. The Valkyrie were tall beings with scales that changed color with their moods. Their eyes were large and golden, and they moved with the careful grace of creatures who had never known true defeat. They believed they had mastered war. This was not arrogance to them. It was simple fact. The Valkyrie had developed something they called the Edicts of Conquest. These were sacred rules that governed all warfare. They dictated exactly how fleets should form in battle. They explained the proper number of ships needed to defeat any enemy. They listed acceptable losses and described the correct rituals of surrender. Every Valkyrie officer memorized these edicts from childhood. Every battle in their long history had followed these rules, and they had never lost. The great chamber of the Galactic Assembly floated in space at the center of known civilization. Representatives from over 200 species gathered there to discuss trade, borders, and the future of their peoples. The Valkyrie held the highest seats, and when they spoke, others listened. On this day, Ambassador Thyron Voss stood before the assembly. His scales shimmered blue and gold under the chamber lights. He was old by Valkyrie standards, nearly 400 years, and he had served the Dominion for most of that time. He knew how power worked. He knew how to use words as weapons. The matter before the assembly was simple. A young species from a small planet called Earth had sent a request. They wanted to join the galactic community. They wanted trade rights, travel permits, and a voice in the assembly. Thyron had studied the humans for many years. He found them fascinating, in the way one might find a dangerous animal fascinating. They were clever, yes, they had developed faster than light travel surprisingly quickly, but they were also chaotic, emotional, and violent. Their history was a mess of wars fought for reasons that made no sense. They killed each other over resources, over beliefs, over things as foolish as lines drawn on maps. Worst of all, they had no proper doctrine of war. They fought without rules. They changed tactics constantly. They did not understand that warfare was a science with correct answers. To the Valkyrie, this made them little better than beasts. Thyron raised his hand for silence. The chamber grew quiet. Honored representatives, he began, his voice smooth and certain. We have reviewed the application from the species known as humanity. We have studied their history, their culture, and their military capabilities. After careful consideration, the Dominion recommends denial of their request. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some species had hoped the humans would be admitted. New members meant new trade opportunities, new ideas, new possibilities. But few would speak against the Valkyrie openly. The humans are too young, Thyron continued. They have possessed space travel for barely 300 years. They have not yet learned to govern themselves peacefully. Their world was nearly destroyed multiple times by their own weapons. They fight among themselves constantly. Even now, their military forces are scattered and disorganized. They follow no proper doctrine. He paused and let his words settle over the assembly. Most importantly, they do not understand war. They treat it as chaos when it should be order. They see it as destruction when it should be precision. They wage it with emotion when it should be waged with calculation. Until they learn these basic truths, they cannot be trusted with membership in our community. A representative from the Cathari, an amphibious species with webbed hands and large dark eyes, raised a tentative question. Ambassador, the humans have expressed willingness to learn. Perhaps we could offer them guidance? Thyron smiled, though there was no warmth in it. You are kind, representative. But some species cannot be taught. The humans have had thousands of years to develop proper warfare. Instead, they created something they call total war. They invented weapons designed to kill millions in seconds. They wrote books celebrating generals who broke every rule of honorable combat. This is not ignorance that can be corrected. This is a fundamental flaw in their nature. He turned to address the full assembly once more. The Dominion proposes that humanity remain in their quarantined sector. They may trade with species willing to take the risk. They may develop their own territories, but they will not receive membership, travel rights, or military access until they demonstrate true civilization. This may take centuries. It may take longer, but we must be patient. We must protect the stability of our community from species that do not understand its foundations. The vote was called. One by one, the representatives signaled their agreement. The Cathari abstained, as did a few others, but the vast majority followed the Valkyrie recommendation. The humans were denied. Far across the galaxy, in a secure facility orbiting Earth's moon, a group of officers watched the broadcast. They had placed listening devices throughout the assembly years ago. The Valkyrie had never found them. The humans were better at hiding than the aliens realized. Admiral Chen Wei stood at the center of the room. She was a small woman with gray hair and steady eyes. She had commanded human fleets for 30 years. She had fought pirates, rebels, and the occasional alien probe that wandered too close to human space. She had read every piece of intelligence gathered about the Valkyrie Dominion. She was not surprised by the vote. She had expected it. "They think we're primitive," said Captain Vasquez, standing beside her. Elena Vasquez was younger, with dark hair and a scar across her jaw from a boarding action years ago. She commanded the battleship Thermopylae, one of the most powerful vessels in the human fleet. "They think war is a science with rules," Admiral Chen replied. "They've fought the same way for 12,000 years. Every enemy they faced learned their doctrine and tried to match it. Every enemy lost. So what do we do?" Admiral Chen turned away from the screen. She looked at her officers, men and women who had trained their entire lives for conflicts that might never come. Humanity had been alone in their corner of the galaxy for 3 centuries. They had built their fleets, developed their weapons, and prepared for the day when they would finally meet the wider universe. That day had come, and the universe had told them they were not welcome. "We stop asking for permission," Admiral Chen said. "The Valkyrie believe they have mastered war because they have never faced an enemy who refused to play by their rules. They have never fought someone who embraces chaos instead of order. They have never met a species that spent its entire history fighting itself and surviving anyway." She walked to the window and looked out at Earth, blue and green and beautiful against the darkness of space. "They call us primitive. They call us emotional. They say we don't understand war." She smiled slightly. "They have no idea what war actually is, but they're about to learn." In the weeks that followed, human ships began moving toward the borders of their quarantined sector. They did not announce their intentions. They did not ask for approval. They simply moved, quietly and carefully, into positions that the Valkyrie had never thought to watch. The Dominion continued with its business. They had dismissed humanity as a minor problem, a young species that would eventually learn its place. They did not realize that humanity had already learned the most important lesson of all. When someone tells you that you are not welcome, you have 2 choices. You can accept their judgment and fade into obscurity, or you can prove them wrong in ways they never imagined possible. Humanity had made its choice, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Cathari had lived on their water world for 10 million years. They were peaceful beings who loved music, art, and the deep currents of their endless oceans. Their cities floated on the waves, and their children learned to swim before they learned to walk. They had developed technology slowly, carefully, always in harmony with their world. When they finally built ships that could travel faster than light, they thought they were joining a community of equals. They sent friendly messages into space. They shared their music and their stories. They waited eagerly for responses. The Valkyrie responded with warships. This was standard procedure for the Dominion. Any species that developed faster than light travel without permission was considered a threat to galactic stability. They had to be brought under control. They had to learn their place in the proper order of things. The Cathari would be given a choice. They could surrender peacefully and accept Dominion rule, or they could resist and be destroyed. Most species chose surrender. The Valkyrie were patient teachers, and life under their rule was not terrible. You simply had to follow the rules. You had to accept that the Dominion knew best. You had to give up certain freedoms in exchange for protection and stability. The Cathari did not want to surrender. They had done nothing wrong. They had simply built ships and explored space, as any curious species might do. But they also knew they could not win a war against the Dominion. Their few vessels were designed for exploration, not combat. They had no weapons worth mentioning. They had no military tradition at all. Admiral Kethoran of the Valkyrie 7th Fleet did not expect any trouble. He had performed dozens of these subjugation missions throughout his career. The pattern was always the same. Arrive with overwhelming force, broadcast the traditional demands, accept the surrender, process the new subjects into the Dominion systems, simple and efficient. His fleet consisted of 200 warships arranged in the sacred crescent of Dominance formation. This formation had been used for 8,000 years. It placed the flagship at the center, protected by layers of cruisers and destroyers. It allowed for maximum firepower concentration while maintaining defensive integrity. No enemy had ever broken through it. The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel near Vareth Prime, the Cathari homeworld. The planet was beautiful, covered almost entirely in water, with small island chains scattered across its surface. Millions of Cathari looked up at the sky and saw the Valkyrie ships blocking their sun. Admiral Ketharan opened communications. "People of Vareth Prime," he announced, his voice broadcast across the planet, "you have violated the laws of the Galactic Assembly by developing faster-than-light travel without proper authorization. The Valkyrie Dominion offers you a choice. Surrender now and accept guidance. Resist and face destruction. You have 1 hour to respond." The Cathari leaders gathered in their floating capital. They debated, argued, and wept. Some wanted to fight, even knowing they would lose. Others begged for surrender, hoping to preserve what they could. In the end, they prepared a message of submission. They had no other choice. Then something strange happened. A single ship emerged from behind Vareth Prime's largest moon. It was unlike anything the Valkyrie had ever seen. The vessel was massive, nearly twice the size of Ketharan's flagship, but it was ugly. Its hull was covered in thick plates of armor that looked like they had been welded on by hand. Weapons jutted from every surface at random angles. The whole thing was painted in dull gray and black, with strange symbols and words that the translation system struggled to understand. The largest words, painted in white across the ship's bow, read, "UES Thermopylae." Admiral Kethoran stared at his display screens in confusion. His officers ran identification protocols, but the ship matched nothing in their databases. It was clearly not Cathari. It was clearly not from any known species. It was something new. A transmission cut through all frequencies. "Valkyrie Fleet, this is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth ship Thermopylae. Vareth Prime and its people are now under the protection of the United Earth Navy. You will withdraw immediately. This is not a request." The bridge of the flagship fell silent. Ketharan's scales flickered through several colors as he processed what he had just heard. Humans. The primitive species from the quarantined sector. The ones the Assembly had just rejected. They had sent a single ship to challenge 200 Valkyrie warships. It was absurd. It was insulting. It was the most ridiculous thing Ketharan had witnessed in his 300 years of service. He began to laugh. "One ship," he said to his officers. "They send one ship. These humans truly are as foolish as the reports claimed." "Admiral," his tactical officer said carefully, "our sensors are having difficulty analyzing the vessel. Its armor composition is unknown. Its weapon systems do not match any standard configurations. We cannot predict its capabilities." Ketharan waved a dismissive hand. "It does not matter. One ship cannot stand against 200. This is simple mathematics. The humans will learn this lesson, and then we will continue with our mission." He opened a response channel. "Human vessel. Your interference is illegal under Galactic Assembly law. You have no authority here. Withdraw now, or you will be destroyed." Captain Vasquez's voice came back, calm and almost amused. "I didn't ask about your laws. I told you to leave. You now have 60 seconds. Ketharan's scales turned dark red with anger. No one spoke to a Valkyrie admiral this way. No one threatened the Dominion's fleet and expected to survive. The humans needed to learn respect, and he would be happy to teach them. "All ships," he commanded. "Destroy that vessel." The Valkyrie fleet began to move. Cruisers adjusted their positions according to the attack protocols laid out in the Edicts of Conquest. Destroyers prepared to flank. The flagship's main weapons charged to full power. 200 ships against one. The outcome was not in doubt. On the bridge of the Thermopylae, Captain Vasquez watched the enemy fleet approach. Her officers reported targeting data, shield status, and weapons readiness. Everything was calm. Everything was professional. They had trained for this moment for years. Vasquez looked at the tactical display showing the Valkyrie formation. It was beautiful. In a way. Perfect lines, perfect spacing, every ship in exactly the right position, like a dance performed by creatures who had practiced the same steps for thousands of years. She smiled. They're moving exactly as predicted, her tactical officer reported. Same formation we've seen in every recording. Of course they are, Vasquez replied. They've never had a reason to change. Why would they? It's always worked before. She stood up from her command chair and looked at her crew. Men and women from Earth, from Mars, from the colonies scattered across human space. They had volunteered for this mission knowing they might not come back. They had studied the Valkyrie for years, learned every weakness in their doctrine, every blind spot in their tactics. Today we show them something new, Vasquez said. Today we remind the galaxy that humans don't follow rules. We break them. She sat back down and gripped her armrests. All weapons free. All stations, prepare for combat. And somebody start the clock. I told them 60 seconds, and I meant it. The Thermopylae's engines roared to full power. The Battle of Vereth Prime was about to begin. The Valkyrie fleet opened fire with perfect coordination. 200 ships released their weapons at the exact same moment, targeting the single human vessel with mathematical precision. Energy beams crossed the void in elegant patterns. Missiles followed calculated paths. Everything happened exactly as the edicts of conquest prescribed. The Thermopylae should have died in that first volley. Any proper warship would have raised shields, assumed a defensive posture, and tried to survive long enough to retreat. That was how warfare worked. That was how it had always worked. Captain Vasquez gave a different order. All ahead full. Take us straight into them. The Thermopylae accelerated toward the enemy fleet, not away, not sideways, directly into the storm of incoming fire. The ship's armor absorbed the first hits. Thick plates designed by engineers who knew that human ships would never match alien shield technology, so they had built something else instead. They had built a vessel that could take punishment no sane species would ever accept. The Valkyrie gunners watched in confusion as their target grew larger instead of smaller. This was wrong. This violated every principle of combat. Ships retreated from overwhelming force. Ships tried to survive. Ships did not charge directly at 200 enemies like a wild animal attacking a hunter. Then the Thermopylae started firing back. Human weapons technology was different from anything the galaxy had seen. The Valkyrie used elegant energy beams that struck with precision. Humans used something much simpler. They used metal. They used explosives. They used the basic principle that a heavy object moving fast enough could destroy almost anything. Railguns fired tungsten rounds at a fraction of light speed. Each impact punched through Valkyrie shields like paper. Missile pods launched dozens of warheads at once, overwhelming point defense systems designed for single precise attacks. Laser batteries carved burning lines across enemy hulls, and through it all, the Thermopylae kept moving, kept changing direction, kept doing things that no warship should do. Admiral Kethoran shouted orders from his bridge, but his fleet was falling apart. The humans were not fighting the way enemies fought. They were not maintaining formation. They were not following predictable patterns. The Thermopylae rolled and twisted like a living thing, never staying in one place long enough for the Valkyrie to coordinate their fire. Worse, the humans were aiming for things the Valkyrie never protected. Engine pods, sensor arrays, communication dishes. Instead of trying to destroy ships outright, they were crippling them, leaving vessels dead in space while moving on to the next target. It was brutal. It was wasteful. It was absolutely effective. 20 seconds into the battle, 15 Valkyrie ships were disabled. Adjust formation, Kethoran commanded. Concentration pattern 7. All ships focus fire on the human vessel. His fleet tried to respond, but concentration pattern 7 required ships to move into specific positions. The humans seemed to know exactly where those positions were. Every time a Valkyrie cruiser tried to reach its assigned location, the Thermopylae was there first. Weapons blazing. 30 seconds. 28 ships disabled. The human vessel plunged into the center of the fleet, where no enemy ship should ever go. At close range, the Valkyrie could not use their most powerful weapons without risking friendly fire. But the humans did not seem to care about close range. They seemed to prefer it. Something detached from the Thermopylae's hull, then another, then dozens more. Small armored pods rocketed toward nearby Valkyrie ships and attached to their hulls. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the pods cut through the armor and released their contents. Human Marines. The Valkyrie had not fought a boarding action in 6,000 years. Why would they? Space combat was conducted at range, with weapons, according to proper doctrine. The idea of sending soldiers onto enemy ships was barbaric. It was ancient. It was something no civilized species would ever consider. The humans considered it standard procedure. 40 seconds. 35 ships disabled. 3 more boarded and captured. Admiral Kethoran watched his tactical display with growing horror. His perfect fleet was being torn apart by a single ship and its crew of madmen. Every tactic he tried failed. Every formation he ordered was broken before it could form. The humans fought like chaos given physical form, and his officers had no idea how to respond. "Admiral," his communications officer said, voice shaking, "we are receiving reports from multiple vessels. Boarding parties are taking control of bridge sections. Captain Vethka reports hand-to-hand combat on his ship. He says the humans are. He says they are smiling. Smiling. They were enjoying this. They had come to fight 200 warships with one, and they were having fun. 50 seconds. 47 ships disabled or captured. The Thermopylae came about and headed directly for the flagship. Its hull was scorched and dented from 100 impacts. But it was still moving, still fighting, still coming. Admiral Kethoran finally understood that he was facing something the Valkyrie had never encountered before. He was facing an enemy that was not afraid to die. "All ships," he broadcast, his voice breaking. "Retreat. Emergency jump. All ships retreat immediately." The sacred formation shattered. Valkyrie warships turned and fled in every direction, abandoning their disabled comrades, abandoning the mission, abandoning everything the edicts of conquest demanded. For the first time in 12,000 years, a Dominion fleet ran from battle. 60 seconds. The clock stopped. Captain Vasquez stood on her damaged bridge and watched the enemy ships disappear into faster-than-light travel. Her crew was exhausted, injured, and cheering. They had done the impossible. They had broken the unbreakable. "Damage report," she ordered. "Hull integrity at 60%. We've lost 4 railgun batteries and 2 missile pods. 12 crew members wounded, none dead. The armor held, Captain." It held. Vasquez nodded. The engineers back home would be pleased. They had designed the Thermopylae to take exactly this kind of punishment. Heavy armor instead of shields. Overwhelming firepower instead of elegant weapons. Chaos instead of order. Everything the galaxy said was wrong, and everything that actually worked. A new signal came through the communication system. It was from the Cathari floating city below, broadcast on an open channel so everyone could hear. "Human vessel, this is First Speaker Milana of the Cathari people. We witnessed what you have done. We do not have words to express our gratitude. You saved us. How can we ever repay you?" Vasquez smiled, though she knew the real battle was just beginning. The Valkyrie would return with more ships, more weapons, more determination to destroy the humans who had humiliated them. But that was a problem for another day. "You don't owe us anything," she replied. "We didn't come here for payment. We came because someone needed help, and we could provide it. That's what humans do." She looked out at the debris field where Valkyrie ships floated dead in space. Marines were already moving to secure the captured vessels. Intelligence teams would tear them apart, learning every secret, finding every weakness. The humans had won more than a battle today. They had won knowledge that would change everything. "Besides," Vasquez added quietly, "we wanted them to know something important. We wanted them to understand that the rules they follow mean nothing to us, and we wanted them to be afraid." Below, on Vareth Prime, millions of Cathari looked up at the sky where their sun was shining again. They had witnessed something that would spread across the galaxy in hours. A single human ship had defeated a Dominion fleet. The masters of war had been humiliated by a species they called primitive. Nothing would ever be the same. And somewhere in the depths of space, Admiral Kethoran sat in his damaged flagship and stared at nothing. He had followed the edicts perfectly. He had done everything correctly. And he had still lost. The humans did not fight with rules. They fought to win. He finally understood why that was so terrifying. The recording of the Battle of Vareth Prime spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within hours, every species with access to communications networks had seen it. They watched a single human ship charge into 200 enemies. They watched ancient formations crumble. They watched the mighty Valkyrie fleet run away. And they started asking questions. The Galactic Assembly convened an emergency session. Representatives who had voted to reject humanity now sat in uncomfortable silence as Ambassador Thyron Voss demanded action. His scales were dark with rage, and his voice echoed through the great chamber. "This is an act of war," he declared. "The humans violated galactic law. They attacked a Dominion fleet engaged in lawful business. They have committed crimes that demand punishment." "What punishment do you suggest?" asked the Cathari representative. Her voice was quiet but steady. She no longer seemed afraid. "The human homeworld must be quarantined completely. Their ships must be impounded. Their colonies must be placed under Dominion supervision, and the criminals responsible for this attack must be surrendered for trial. And if they refuse?" Thyron's scales flashed angry red. "Then we will destroy them. We will send every fleet in the Dominion against their pitiful territories. We will burn their worlds and scatter their people. They will learn what happens to species that challenge our authority." Murmurs spread through the chamber. But they were different from before. Before, the representatives had murmured agreement with everything the Valkyrie said. Now, they murmured doubt. They had seen the recording. They had seen what one human ship could do against 200. What would happen if the humans sent more than one? Before anyone could respond, the chamber doors opened. A human walked in. Captain Elena Vasquez moved through the assembly with confident steps. Her uniform was clean, but burn scars marked her face and hands from the battle just days before. She had come directly from Verath Prime, traveling at maximum speed to reach this moment. She had something to say, and she wanted to say it here, in front of everyone. Valkyrie guards moved to stop her, but she walked past them like they were not there. Something in her eyes made them hesitate. Something that said she had faced worse than them and won. "I am Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Navy," she announced to the chamber. "I commanded the ship that defeated your 7th Fleet. I am here to deliver a message from humanity." Thyron Voss pointed at her with a trembling hand. "Guards, arrest this criminal. She has no right to be here." "Then remove me," Vasquez replied calmly. "If you can." No one moved. Vasquez walked to the central podium and looked around the chamber. Hundreds of alien faces stared back at her. She saw fear in some, curiosity in others, and hatred in a few. She did not care about any of it. "You declared war a science," she began. "You built rules and rituals and sacred formations. You created something called the Edicts of Conquest and followed them for 12,000 years. Every battle happened the same way. Every enemy fought the same tactics. And you won every time." She paused and let her words sink in. "But you never asked an important question. What happens when someone refuses to play your game? What happens when an enemy does not care about your rules? What happens when they fight to win instead of fighting to follow procedure?" She smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. "You found out at Verath Prime." Thyron slammed his hand on his podium. "You were lucky. One ship against a fleet caught by surprise. Next time, we will be prepared. Next time, we will destroy you. Will you?" Vasquez asked. "Let me tell you something about humanity. We spent our entire existence fighting each other. We invented war before we invented farming. We developed weapons that could destroy our own planet multiple times. We had conflicts that killed millions of our people for reasons that made no sense to anyone watching." She turned to address the whole assembly. "You call that primitive. You call us emotional and chaotic. But here is what you do not understand. Every generation of humans lived through war. Every generation learned and adapted and survived. We did not create a perfect doctrine, because perfect doctrines become predictable. Instead, we learned the only rule that matters." She leaned forward. "There are no rules. There is only winning and losing. And we have gotten very, very good at winning." The chamber was silent. Representatives from species long subjugated by the Dominion looked at each other. They saw something in Vasquez they had forgotten existed. They saw hope. "You rejected our application for membership," Vasquez continued. "You said we were not civilized enough to join your community. Fine. We do not need your permission. We will build our own community. We will protect those who want protection. We will ally with those who want freedom." She reached into her pocket and placed a small data chip on the podium. "This contains the coordinates of every human colony, every station, every ship we have. You wanted to know where we are? Now you know. Come find us if you want a war. We have been waiting for a real fight our entire existence." She turned and began walking toward the exit. "Captain Vasquez," a voice called out. It was the representative from the Morvathi, a species of insectoid beings who had served the Dominion for 3,000 years. "What you did at Verath Prime, could you do it again?" Could you protect others as you protected the Cathari? Vasquez stopped and looked back. Yes. Any species that asks for our protection will receive it. Any species that wants to stand with us is welcome. We do not conquer. We do not demand worship. We simply fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. Why? The Morvathi asked. What do you gain? Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Humans have a strange history. We spent centuries hurting each other for stupid reasons. We nearly destroyed ourselves many times. But we also learned something important along the way. We learned that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak. We learned that freedom matters more than safety. And we learned that bullies only understand one language. She nodded toward Thyron Voss. Force. The Dominion ruled through force for 12,000 years. They made everyone afraid. But fear only works when people believe you cannot be beaten. At Varath Prime, we showed that you can be beaten. We showed that your perfect doctrine has flaws. We showed that your empire is not as powerful as everyone thought. She smiled again. Now everyone knows. And that changes everything. She walked out of the chamber, leaving silence behind her. In the days that followed, something remarkable happened. Species began sending messages to the human territories. The Cathari formally requested an alliance. The Morvathi asked for military advisors. A dozen other species, long quiet under Dominion rule, began asking questions they had never dared ask before. What if we do not have to be afraid anymore? What if there is another way? What if the humans are right? The Valkyrie Dominion responded with threats and warnings. They promised destruction for any species that allied with humanity. They mobilized their remaining fleets. They prepared for the war they knew was coming. But they also began studying the recordings from Varath Prime. They began trying to understand how one ship had defeated 200. They began looking for patterns in the chaos. They found none. Human warfare had no patterns. It was pure adaptation, pure creativity, pure survival instinct, refined over millions of years of killing each other. Every human officer was trained to think independently. Every human ship was designed to fight alone if necessary. Every human soldier knew that following orders blindly was the surest path to defeat. The Dominion's military theorists wrote confused reports. How do you fight an enemy who does not fight the same way twice? How do you prepare for tactics that do not exist until the moment they are used? How do you defeat chaos? They had no answers, and across the galaxy, humanity continued to build. Ships launched from orbital shipyards, soldiers trained in academies designed to produce creative thinkers instead of obedient followers. Alliances formed with species eager to escape Dominion control. Captain Vasquez returned to the Thermopylae and prepared for the battles ahead. She knew the war was just beginning. She knew the Dominion would come for them with everything they had. She also knew something the Valkyrie had not yet realized. Humanity had been at war since the beginning of time. Every generation, every century, every day. They had learned to survive in conditions that would break other species. They had built civilizations on ruins and hope. The Dominion thought they were starting a war. Humanity knew they were just continuing one they had been fighting forever. And they were ready. The war lasted 3 years. It began slowly, with small battles along the borders of human space. The Valkyrie sent probing fleets to test human defenses. Each time, they encountered something unexpected. Ships that fought differently from last time. Tactics that no one had seen before. Weapons that seemed impossible, and strategies that made no sense until they worked perfectly. Human admirals shared their knowledge with allied species. They taught the Cathari to abandon formation when under attack. They showed the Morvathi how to use terrain and obstacles instead of meeting enemies in open space. They introduced concepts that the galaxy had never heard before: guerrilla warfare, asymmetric tactics, psychological operations. The Dominion could not adapt. For 12,000 years, their military had followed the same procedures. Officers were trained to execute doctrine perfectly. Creativity was considered dangerous. Independent thinking was discouraged. When faced with an enemy who changed constantly, they had no response except to try harder at what had always worked before. It did not work anymore. The coalition of free worlds grew larger with each passing month. Species that had been silent for centuries declared independence from the Dominion. Valkyrie governors were expelled from conquered planets. Trade routes that had served the Empire for millennia suddenly closed to their ships. Admiral Chen Wei, now commander of all coalition forces, coordinated the war from a mobile headquarters that never stayed in one place. Human intelligence operatives mapped every weakness in Dominion infrastructure. Human diplomats worked constantly to bring more species into the alliance. Human engineers designed new weapons based on captured Valkyrie technology. But the heart of the war effort was Elena Vasquez. She had been promoted to admiral after Vareth Prime, given command of the First Strike Fleet, the most powerful force humanity had ever assembled. Her ships were crewed by veterans who had trained in the chaos of human military tradition. Her officers were chosen for their ability to think independently, to adapt, to win when all logic said they should lose. They never lost. Vasquez led her fleet through 18 major battles in 3 years. Each time, the Valkyrie believed they had finally figured out how humans fought. Each time, she proved them wrong. She attacked from unexpected directions. She retreated when she should have pressed forward, then struck when they least expected. She made deals with Dominion officers willing to defect and used their knowledge to devastating effect. The galaxy watched in amazement as the ancient empire crumbled. In the 3rd year of the war, Admiral Vasquez gathered the largest fleet ever assembled under human command. Ships from Earth, from the colonies, from every allied species filled the space around the staging area. Thousands of vessels, millions of soldiers, sailors, and pilots, all waiting for the order to move. "Today we end this," Vasquez announced to her commanders. "Today we go to their homeworld, not to destroy them, not to conquer them, but to deliver a message they cannot ignore." The fleet jumped into faster-than-light travel. They emerged around the Valkyrie homeworld. The Dominion's remaining fleets waited for them. Every ship they could gather, every weapon they could prepare, every officer who still believed in the edicts of conquest. It was the largest Valkyrie force ever assembled. 500 warships arranged in the sacred formations that had served them for 12,000 years. Against them came the coalition fleet. Human ships at the center, surrounded by Cathari cruisers, Morvathi carriers, and vessels from a dozen other species. They did not form any recognizable pattern. They simply moved like a swarm, each ship knowing its place without needing orders. Admiral Vasquez opened communications. "Valkyrie High Council," she said. "This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Coalition of Free Worlds. We have come to end this war. You may surrender now and preserve your people, or you may fight and watch everything you built disappear. The choice is yours." The response came from Thyron Voss, who had returned to his homeworld to defend it personally. "Humans," he spat. "You think you have won? You have only shown the galaxy your true nature. Violent, chaotic, destructive. Even if you defeat us today, you will never be accepted. You will never be civilized. You will always be the monsters you have proven yourselves to be." Vasquez was quiet for a moment. "You are right about one thing," she replied. "We are violent. We are chaotic. We are everything you said we were. But we are also something else. We are survivors. Our species nearly destroyed itself a dozen times. We lived through wars that killed hundreds of millions. We watched our own cities burn and our own people die. And we kept going. We kept building. We kept hoping." She looked at the massive fleet on her display. "You think war is a science. You think it has rules and procedures and correct answers. But war is not a science. War is survival. War is doing whatever it takes to protect the people you love. War is being willing to die so that others might live." She gave the signal, and the coalition fleet began to move. "You mastered your kind of war, but you never understood ours. You never understood that humans fight harder when we are losing. You never understood that we do not give up when things look hopeless. You never understood that our chaos is not weakness. It is strength." The battle began. It was shorter than anyone expected. The coalition ships did not attack in waves or formations. They attacked everywhere at once, overwhelming Dominion defenses, crippling warships, and pushing through to the inner system. Valkyrie officers tried to respond, but every tactic they used had been anticipated. Every formation they attempted was broken before it could form. Human Marines boarded Valkyrie vessels and captured them intact. Human hackers disrupted Dominion communications. Human pilots flew missions that no sane military would attempt, and succeeded through sheer determination. In 4 hours, it was over. The Dominion fleet was scattered. Thyron Voss was captured on his own flagship. The Valkyrie homeworld lay open and defenseless. But Admiral Vasquez did not order an invasion. She did not demand unconditional surrender. She did not burn cities or execute leaders. Instead, She went down to the surface personally. She met with the Valkyrie High Council in their ancient hall of government. They expected conquest. They expected humiliation. They expected the violence they had dealt to so many others. What they received was a hand extended in peace. War is not about destruction, Vasquez told them. War is about ending threats. You were a threat to the freedom of countless species. That threat is now ended. What happens next is up to you. She laid out terms. The Dominion would release all subject worlds. The edicts of conquest would be abolished. The Valkyrie would join the new Galactic Assembly as equals, not rulers. They would have to learn to live alongside the species they once dominated. It will be difficult, Vasquez acknowledged. Your people believed they were superior for 12,000 years. That belief is wrong. All species are capable of greatness and cruelty. All species have something to offer. You are not better than others. But you are not worse either. You are simply different, the High Council accepted. 1 year later, the new Galactic Assembly convened. Representatives from every free world gathered in the Great Chamber. Valkyrie sat beside Kethari. Morvathi shared tables with former enemies, and at the center of it all stood the human delegation. They were not given the highest seats. They did not demand special treatment. They simply took their place as one species among many, equal partners in a galaxy that was finally learning to live together. Admiral Vasquez addressed the assembly one final time before retiring from military service. Humanity did not come to the stars to conquer, she said. We came because we were curious. We came because we wanted to meet others like ourselves. We came because the universe is vast and beautiful, and we wanted to see it. She looked around at the gathered representatives. We were told we were too primitive for this community, too violent, too chaotic. Perhaps we are all of those things, but we are also loyal. We are also brave, and we never abandon those who need us. She smiled. The old order was based on fear and rules that served only the powerful. The new order will be different. It will be messy. It will be complicated. Species will argue and disagree and struggle to understand each other. That is normal. That is healthy. That is how growth happens. She raised her hand in farewell. We did not master war. We never claimed to. But we understood something the Dominion forgot. War is not meant to be mastered. War is meant to be ended. And endings, when they finally come, can be the start of something beautiful. She walked out of the chamber as applause followed her. Outside, she looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships still patrolled, keeping the peace, protecting the weak, exploring the unknown. Her people had come so far from the small blue planet where they began. They had proven themselves to the galaxy. Now it was time to discover what came next. The end.